continually making my life more exciting. Cool, let's move on. It really feels a bit like magic. I actually am off gauge, but in a way that makes me think I'm secretly on gauge. Hi everyone, welcome to episode 9 of Garden Variety Knits. This is just your very classic, series of videos about kind of updates in my crafting life. Mostly knitting, as you can tell from the title, but I dabble in some sewing and some mending and kind of adjacent things sometimes as well. If you're new, I'm Kelsey and I'm a New Zealander. I'm living in Switzerland. I've been here for a couple of years. I've been knitting about that time as well, kind of seriously. I learned to knit as a kid. I think that's almost all the intro I'll go through today. Yeah, it's really nice to have you, whether you're returning or new. I really appreciate you just coming to hang out. Today I'm wearing, you probably can't see much more than the top, but it's my square neck camisole, which is by Helene Weber, I want to say. And I quite like it. I really want to knit another one. My biggest gripe with this one is that I knit the double knit kind of edging a bit too tight, especially across the front, but it also even kind of sits quite high up into like my armpits as well. So it's like, I love it. It's I haven't knit that many garments, so almost everything is like my most worn knits, but I do wear it a lot. But I also, I don't know, I think it could be improved. And I'd love to make one in like a knitting for olive merino, I think. I think that would be one of the nicer fibers that I could use for it. Anyway, we can get started with my finished object for the week, which you won't have seen because I cast it on since the last time I recorded. If you are have been here for a little bit, you might remember that at one point my boyfriend came back from like a walk he'd been on near our house, like a bit of a hike really, and he'd found like maybe within an hour of walking from our house, like an alpaca farm that was selling yarn that I suspect was like hand spun by the people who own the alpacas or someone they know, and they were selling it in kind of one of those little pathside cupboards where you just like put money in a box or you do a little digital QR payment, and he'd seen the yarn and just immediately been like, okay, well I guess I have to buy that for Kelsey. Apparently there were 2 cakes left, each 50 grams, and in like one was a cream and one was like this chocolate color, and he just bought them both because he was like, she'll want more yarn than less, and then he couldn't have bought more. And so I had these beautiful alpaca yarns and they were just so soft. Like I swear they just like doused those alpacas in conditioner or something before they did the shearing. I don't know, it felt like they'd had a salon day because it's incredibly soft. Yeah, it was definitely a little bit kind of hand spun, it was kind of thick and thin, and I also didn't have any yardage information, so I was kind of sitting here kind of not sure what to do with these beautiful like special yarns. And then I think in the last couple of weeks I just got inspired to use them. I had been working on a couple of other projects which are coming up that had gotten to the point of just mostly being like stockinette, and I don't know, I think I just wanted something like slightly novel, and so I just let myself have like a random spurious cast on. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later. Basically, I ended up, I had never knit any color work, and I really wanted to use these 2 colors together. So I was looking for some like Colorwork hat patterns and just hoping that I had enough to make a hat. I did try to estimate yardages, like look up some worsted or Aran weight hat patterns and see how much of each yarn, they were using in the Colorwork cases. And I did manage to make a hat, so I will show you. Because it's alpaca, it's very like floppy, but that doesn't really matter when it's on because it's got a little bit of negative ease. So yeah, this is the hat that I made. It's actually a free pattern from Spruce Hill Knits. It's on their blog. I found it through Ravelry search, but it just like links out to the blog post. And it's called Fair Isle Knit Hat. Of course, I will link everything. Every pattern I ever mention will always be in the description box, or you can always comment if anything's missing and I'll add it. So it's actually for an Aran weight wool. I don't really know whether mine... I tried doing the wraps per inch test on this yarn, but I don't know how the wraps should look. Like the first time I tried it, I was like, okay, I counted my wraps, and then I went and looked it up on the table and I was like, oh, that says sport weight, that's not right. So then I tried wrapping the amount of times to, like, assuming that it was worsted, for example, and I was like, is that a correct kind of wrapping distance? Because like I think you're meant to do it so that like the halos touch, but not, it's not like squishing each one. Anyway, I think I would need a lot more practice. I might try and like do like fake the wraps per inch test on yarns that I know the weight of, so that I can see what the wraps look like. You know, like basically be like, okay, I have a light fingering, it's meant to be however many wraps per inch. Do that many wraps in an inch and then like look at how the yarn's distributed, so that I can like maybe hone that instinct a bit better. But it seems like a very imprecise test. I think maybe easier is just knitting up a gauge swatch and finding a gauge that you like. Yeah, I think because I didn't have yardage information and I didn't really know how thick my yarn was, I was like, I'm pretty happy just kind of having a pattern and making it work. But I don't know, something in my brain, I think I like buying patterns when it's going to make my life a lot easier. And I feel like there's a lot of value coming from that. But in this case, because I felt like I'd have to, you know, make it work for my mystery yarn and maybe not actually have enough to finish the project, I felt quite reluctant to purchase a pattern, because I felt like then I would maybe purchase it and then realize I couldn't even make that with the yarn I had. And also it felt like I had to do a fair amount of work, maybe gauge wise, like adjusting. So yeah, I kind of ended up quite happy to find a free pattern that I could use. Also, it was my very first color work, and I don't know, I guess as well that felt like it came with risks, and I didn't want to, or like I didn't know what to look for. So it felt like finding a free pattern was just completely risk-free. Yeah, I don't know if that makes sense. So before I even started this, I needed to learn to knit colorwork, and so I watched a bunch of like videos in preparation on kind of the basics. I'll link 3 videos in particular that I found quite interesting, from Roxanne Richardson and from Suzanne Bryan. And so they kind of cover things like yarn dominance, and also whether you have parallel floats or diagonal floats and how that can change whether you have a dominant yarn as well. And then also just some things on, you know, how do you hold your yarn? Is it like 2 in left hand, 2 in right hand, 1 in each? Yeah, and I was just trying a bunch of different things. In fairly typical fashion, rather than actually knitting a swatch, I just decided to start the hat and that would be my swatch. Because then at the same time I could work out whether or not this pattern was going to fit me, because it's a one size pattern that you adjust by just, you know, you add multiples of 10, which is how big this motif is. And so I needed to work out, you know, how big I wanted the hat, and I needed to work out, I also was like, if I just start knitting, I'll get a sense for whether or not I have enough yarn to finish it, or if I need to look for an alternative plan. So I did all of that, and also was practicing my very first color work, but I kind of knew that I wasn't going to keep the result. So I did end up, I think, basically not finishing this, but I had done everything except the brim, and then I frogged the whole thing and started again. I ended up settling, after a little bit of experimentation, on 1 strand in each hand. And then I also, I think because of that, like originally I was trying like both strands in my left hand to kind of knit slightly continentally, Norwegian style. But, and I liked that because it meant that you could twist to trap floats, but it just wasn't as smooth or comfortable in the end. And so when I did the one in each hand, I trapped my floats using, I think it's called a weaving method. Yeah, it's very easy when you're trapping the left yarn, because all you do is basically you just duck your needle under your left yarn to do a normal like English style knit, and then you've done one trap. But then to trap the right yarn, you need to do this funny little dance where you like insert your needle, wrap your right yarn, wrap your left yarn, unwrap your right yarn, and then pull the knit stitch through. I'm sure if you've worked colourwork, you know this, but I didn't even know, like, I do find it interesting. I've watched a lot of knitting kind of YouTube, but everyone who works colourwork assumes that you know everything about working colourwork. And then there's people who don't work colourwork. And I feel like I haven't seen a lot of people learn colourwork and then talk much about, I don't know, that in particular. I don't know, maybe it's just that I've missed, you know, it would be a very short phase in a particular person's videos. So yeah. Anyway, so I did, yeah, the weaving method for trapping floats, and you can definitely see them peeking through, but I think that that's probably just, one, the reality of colourwork, and two, maybe just to do with this yarn not being like the best colourwork yarn ever. It seems like colourwork is definitely improved by yarn choice massively. Yeah, just speaking of that, I've also noticed the stitches kind of seem to sit like with one leg forward. It's like they kind of are all like, rather than being shoulder to shoulder, it's like they're like girls in a sorority picture, you know, like shoulders overlapping. That's kind of the vibe I'm getting with this yarn, and I don't know if it's the way that it was spun. Like, it's a 2-ply yarn. Maybe it's just not that balanced. I don't know. I don't mind at all, because, you know, this is just like, I don't know, it's very kind of granola and natural kind of vibes, and I don't mind if it's not perfect, you know, in the slightest. Yeah, so when I actually knit this hat, okay, so first of all I knit it, and then I kind of was like, okay, I'm confident I have enough yarn. I was really unsure whether I should block it or not, because I didn't know how the yarn would behave when I blocked it. But I was also worried that if I blocked like my first attempt, it wouldn't behave the same on a second block, and so I actually wouldn't gain any information, because I didn't know how much it would change due to the fiber itself, like the yarn itself stretching out versus just the stitches settling. Yeah, so I ended up not blocking my first attempt, but I was pretty confident I had enough for a hat from that. And I also, like, looking at it, I mean, it also had the same, so it had the same thing where, like, some of the legs of the stitches kind of puffed out. And I'd hoped that that would go away more in blocking, but again, not super fast. But I think the pattern says 5mm needle, and I just, looking at it, I felt like the stitches were a little too big. And again, that could have been something to do with my floats and colourwork tension, but I figured I would try going down a needle size and see if that improved things. So continually making my life more exciting, having determined that I had enough yarn to knit it on 5mm with 90 stitches, I then went to a 4.5mm needle and cast on 100 stitches. So I had more stitches, more stitches and smaller stitches, and with like, there'll be enough yarn. Yes. So both times I did the same thing, which is that I did a provisional cast on right before the colourwork, because it is a bottom-up hat. But I wanted to have a nice brim, ideally folded if possible. And I figured I would do that at the end with all the yarn I had left. So I used the provisional cast on that you, it's the really nice one where you like cast the stitches directly onto both your needle and a spare cable. And so later you can just use the stitches on the cable like straight off. You don't have to unpick like any crochet and then like pick the stitches up or anything. So I really liked that. So then I just started the colourwork, and yeah, like I mentioned, I was doing one strand in each hand. I decided to use the cream as the dominant color because I had noticed knitting my first attempt that it was actually a fair bit thinner on average than this kind of chocolate color. But yeah, so you knit the color work and that's all just straight up, no decreases or anything. And then in the pattern, the decreases are done, it's like knit 2 together, knit 8, you know, so in the repeats of 10 stitches. And then the next round is knit 2 together, knit 7, or well, you do a plain round. But it meant that you would end up with a bunch of knit 2 together stacked on top of each other. Whereas I feel like normally with decreases, you try to have them offset so that you end up with like a diagonal line. So I actually did follow the pattern for like 2 rounds. And I really didn't like how it was looking, having the knit 2 togethers, you probably can't see, but like just stacked straight on top of each other. And I felt like if I just kept doing it, it would look really messy. So I ended up doing what I wanted, which is to offset them slightly, which kind of resulted in a spiral. Yeah, I don't know. I think I probably, if I'd thought about it, I would have done just completely different decreases, but it's fine. Yeah, then after I'd done all of that and I'd like finished the top, I went back to my provisional cast on. And what I actually did, because at this point I had some cream left and some brown, so I started with the cream first and I started knitting ribbing. And my idea was to do basically what I've done and have like cream and then brown and then have the brown folded to hide the cream. I haven't knit hats before. Like I've knit one beanie, which was cabled, and it just had one layer of twisted rib brim at the bottom. So I'd kind of seen enough people talk about like double folded brims and stuff that I kind of had this vague idea of what they were, but I think I was actually wrong about how most of them work. So I started knitting the cream and then was going to knit brown so that I would flip the brown outside and have the cream on the inside. But once I started looking up tutorials about how double folded ribbed brims actually work, it looks like you actually flip the bottom of the brim inside the hat and then kind of knit the stitches together, or like do a graft. Yeah, and the thing I had been aiming for is basically just having a long brim that you fold outside. But I also was aware that because it was hiding this cream, it needed to stay in place. Like I couldn't just fold it and then just like let it sit there, because if it came unfolded just a little bit, like this cream would peek out in this way that I didn't think would, like I didn't want that. But yeah, so in the end, once I'd finished this brown ribbing, I did a tubular bind off, and then I folded it up and I used the very last of my yarn to like sew it onto the hat, you know, just above the cream, in the row of stitches above the cream. Yeah, it was kind of just like, I guess like a little semi-duplicate stitch graft, but I tried to make sure that I did it like I was sewing to the stitches just on the inside of this fold, so that, because like I could have grafted it directly, but I wanted it to look like it had been folded, you know, and it was just that the fold was staying in place. So I'm actually quite happy with that. And I couldn't find any tutorials to do that. Like all of the folded brim tutorials on YouTube were for folding it on the inside. So yeah, but I quite like the look of this. It's like you folded it yourself, but it just stays that way. So yeah, pretty happy with that. Pretty happy that the cream is hidden, but it's a bit of a near thing. Yeah, it's like it is just below that, and it is just on the inside of this fold. But yeah, it worked out and I'm very happy. My hair is not in a conducive thing for hat trying on, so I will hopefully insert some footage, or maybe you'll have already seen it, of me like putting the hat on my head. And then the other thing I was going to show you, you know, really, I don't know, it's pretty alright. I wanted to show you my floats, because now that I have started knitting colorwork, this is the sort of thing I'm going to be very interested in seeing in other people. So the main thing is that you can see this top one. Yeah, so this pattern is a good one for beginners, I think, but you definitely have to learn to trap floats, because these top ones, it's like there's 9 stitches in between the single brown stitches in that row, and so you can see that float tension's not super good, but I think that's partly because the hat starts decreasing like immediately afterwards. So yeah, it would have been good if it was flat, but it's kind of getting cinched in. But yeah, honestly, overall, so fun. Like, I found the Colorwork wildly addictive, and I don't know, I got so much joy out of seeing like this motif appear. It is like, it really feels a bit like magic, just being able to knit like pictures almost, you know? Yeah, so I think more Colorwork is in my future. And this is now everything I dreamed in terms of like something special. I feel like it does show off the yarn, the 2 colors, like the 2 natural colors really well. And it's super warm and super soft. And I think, yeah, my one regret is maybe that it's a bit tall and the top doesn't flop in any particularly nice way. It just kind of sits there like above my head. I'm hoping that over time, because it is, like I said, quite a floppy material, that it will just develop a permanent flop, especially if I wear it the same way around all the time. But yeah, here we are, finished object. Very happy, honestly, 10 out of 10 for my first Colorwork project, although I cheated because I did my first hat and then I frogged it and then I did it again. So I had a practice round. I was gonna mention, I said that this cast on was like quite spontaneous, and I feel like that's just, I want to like have a little digression about how I think about, you know, having works in progress. For ages, I just didn't understand people who had, well, I understood it, but I didn't want to have like tons of projects on the go all the time, because in my mind, it's like, if I have something that I'm knitting, I want to finish it. And anytime I stop knitting it and start knitting other projects, like I'm delaying the finish of my first project, which is true. And like, for example, when I knit my boyfriend's jumper, which was definitely the most knitting I've ever done on any one project, like if I had too many other projects, it just would never have gotten any attention, and it needed like, you know, hours of knitting every single week. So yeah, I think on the one hand, it is really effective to kind of limit yourself to, you know, only a couple projects so that they do see progress. But on the flip side, this hat took me 2 days, and it was so exciting and so joyful. You know, okay, after this success, I now really want to make Colorwork mittens for like my whole family, my parents and sister, for Christmas. And realistically, I'm not going to like do all of those back to back as my single focus with no other knitting happening in the background. So like they need to be little things that I do in the middle of other projects. And so, yeah, I don't know. I just feel like for things like accessories, which are just so quick and such a nice little bundle of knitting, it kind of makes sense to just, you know, if you're feeling a little bit like your current project's a bit of a slog or something, it makes sense to just do one and take that time. I did the calculations, and I don't know, in terms of number of stitches, this hat is like 1/3 of the body of something else that I'm knitting at the moment on 3mm needles. And it's like, yeah, it kind of makes sense that I could get like, I don't know, another 1/3 of the way through my main project, or I could have like an entire finished little project that I got to think about and dream about and learn new techniques. Yeah, I don't know. So I think I'm softening a little bit towards being a bit of a multitasker. Yeah, especially for things that happen quickly and can give you just that little rush of finishing a project, when maybe that's few and far between if all you're doing is fingering weight garments, which seems to be how I'm trending in terms of my knitting habits. So yeah, I think that doing some like accessories and thicker yarn is something that I should really consider as an alternative to just like committing myself to fingering weight projects and saying I'm not going to be distracted. Okay, hat done. Oh, I wanted to show you, I have, this is everything that I cut off when I wove the ends in. This is everything left. So yeah, I was really quite pleased that I did this trick with the cream on the inside because it really made me have like the most complete usage of this yarn that I possibly could have. So my first work in progress is one that you won't have seen from the last video because in the meantime, I had plans, but I applied for a test knit from 100 Acre Wool, or Bella, I don't know her last name, and it's called the Amoretta Blouse, and it is so pretty. Yeah, it's got quite a few options in the pattern. You can have a button band, or it can just be in the round. You can have short or long sleeves, different edgings. But I think most of the people in the test group just fell in love with the image of exactly how she had done her first sample. And so, yeah, I'm pretty much doing exactly that. It's got this kind of scalloped edging that's done with crochet. And yeah, I really like the kind of buttons down the front. Although I will probably sew it closed to make sure that that sits neatly. I haven't got to that yet. Anyway, I applied and I got accepted, and I've been knitting on it. And first I had to order yarn. So the sample that she did was in Biches et Bûches Le Petit Lambswool, which is a yarn that I've heard about but never used. And I kind of didn't think. I just saw it, it looked pretty, I wanted to apply, and I just figured, okay, it's the recommended yarn, I should try it because then I get to try this yarn that I've heard about. But I think if I'd given it a little more thought, I'd have realized that a short-sleeved, like very low neck blouse was not something that I would necessarily want a non-superwash woolen spun lambswool yarn. But yeah, when I first like picked up the yarn, I really was a bit surprised at how like not soft it is, like even compared to a merino. And I think like it's definitely cloud-like and airy and soft in that way. And I think as a sweater it would be so like light and beautiful. So my boyfriend has a sweater that he thrifted that's made of lambswool, and it's the similar, like if I put it straight on my face it's like a little bit prickly, but like in general, like as a sweater it's just so light and airy and soft, and that's kind of the vibe. So I think if I use this again in the future it'll be for like like a mid layer, not necessarily something next to skin. I guess the good thing is that since it's a low cut top, it won't be up on my like most sensitive skin, and it does soften a bit after blocking. But yeah, I think if I'd thought a bit more critically, I'd have gotten like a merino or like a blend to use for this, something very non-irritating, and maybe tried to go for something a bit less warm as well. Anyway, I did what I did and it's turning out pretty beautifully. So this is what I have so far. It's very hard to look at on the needle, so I'm gonna probably try it on. But it's actually probably a really similar construction to the Bella Knot blouse, which I still have on my needles but haven't really worked on in a while, in that you start by casting on for this little shoulder kind of strip, and then you increase outwards pretty rapidly from it to create kind of a shoulder cap. And then you start doing sleeve increases instead. And it starts off, each shoulder is worked separately and then you join across the back. And that's kind of the way that it does the back neck shaping as well. And then because I'm going to do a button band, this whole thing I'm knitting flat, which is really funny because for some reason I did my swatching for this in the round, or like mock in the round swatches. I need to double check if the pattern says to like check your gauge in the round or not, because it doesn't make sense since the whole garment is flat. I should have swatched flat. Maybe I will try this on. So here we are. As you can maybe see, I've actually finished the sleeves, because once you split the sleeves are like, I think one round and then cast off. And then also there's this little crochet edging, and I decided that I wanted to try the edging and see whether the crochet hook I have would work for it, because I think it's 0.5 mils smaller than the recommended one in the pattern. It looks pretty alright to me. I had to like, I'm not a crochet person, so I had to like refresh my memory on YouTube of like, what is single crochet, what is double crochet, but it's really simple. So honestly, very worth it. I think that was one of the things I was excited about to do this pattern, is to learn that edging. And that will also go all the way around the neckline and then around the bottom hem as well. So I've got these stitch markers down the side for tens of rows in the body. I think I've done like 50 something and it's meant to be 70 something. So I'm like quite close to finish the body now. And then I've also just started this double knit button band on one side, partly just to get an idea of how much width it will add, and then also I was going to do the crochet around the neckline as well, but I've decided I'll wait. So for the double knit button band, just quickly I'll mention that I was using the tutorial from AKA Nora Knits, which I'll link below, on applying the double knit as you go, which is actually really similar to applying an I-cord as you go. As for example, there's the tutorial by Lily Kate France on that, which, okay, so on my other whip, which is the Tombo Tee, I was talking about how my applied I-cord was looking a bit wonky, and Maya from Miles and Tinks commented to say that she had noticed that there was actually a bit of a like error in the tutorial from Lily Kate France on how to apply it, which might have been what I had done, or it might be that I had tried it and then given up and then done something else that was just I made up on my own and was also bad. Anyway, so the tutorial from AKA Nora Knits is really clear, and you could just use that as well to basically apply an I-cord, you know, in terms of how you pick up and connect the stitches that come from the main body of the fabric. So I think that's going to be my go-to method from now on for both double knit and I-cord, because it is really nice not to do all the pickups ahead of time, because, you know, then you can adjust your pickup rate more easily, like frog a little bit. Yeah, so what's left now is to finish the body, and then I think if you're doing the button bands, you have to pick both, like do both button bands first, and then do the crochet edging on the neckline and the hem, because they need to basically go across the tops of and the bottom of the button bands. You can't just like stop and then have like a plain button band. That would look really weird. Yeah, so far this pattern, I mean, it's in testing, so I can't, you know, there's been some errors caught, but overall it's like quite clear, and it is designed to have be like a base pattern that you can use for different garments. So you can have like a long sleeved blouse or a short sleeved one. You can have like more plain, like just like an I-cord or like a plain edge, and it can just be in the round, or you can have, yeah, like this button detail and these like very like frilly feeling like edgings. Yeah. And I did mention the yarn, which is, like I say, Biches Le Petit Lambswool, which is a fingering weight woolen spun 2-ply yarn, and I'm using it in the color blue green, which is so pretty. Like, it's kind of, I don't know, it's quite muted, but like, and it's honestly like the green, like it leans very blue, but like the green's there, you know, it's very kind of ocean kind of colored, but like on a cloudy day. Yeah, I quite like it. The one other thing is that because I'm trying to be like a good test knitter, I actually blocked this after I'd split the sleeves. See, there's like blocked up to here and then unblocked. You can kind of see the change in how even it is. And I measured my gauge after blocking, and I actually am off gauge, but in a way that makes me think I'm secretly on gauge, because I have too many rows and too few stitches per 10 centimeters, which makes me think that if I just stretch it a bit vertically, next time I block, I should have the correct number of rows and the correct number of stitches. So yeah, I'll try that next when I block the final garment. But yeah, this is moving pretty fast, although it's also been pretty much my focus. As I always seem to report on, since this is knit flat, I'm doing my purl rows on this one with Portuguese purling. I've been experimenting as well with using just a light bulb stitch marker, like pinned to my top as a purling pin instead of going all the way around my neck. And that's quite a nice experience. Although again, I think I want one of those ones where you can like hook it in and hook it out without, you know, like with the stitch marker, you have to kind of like open it and close it again. But there's the ones that have like a little twist in them, so you can just like twist it in, twist it out. I think maybe if I'm gonna buy an accessory, that might be a good one. I'm definitely enjoying signing up for test knits because it is like this little bit of extra motivation, like, I don't know, a bit more purpose to the project. But it is funny how I had other plans and now it's just like, well, no, not doing those. I'm gonna make sure I finish this first. Yeah, but that's all right. Especially since my other plans were very summery garments and this does not feel like I'll be able to wear it until, I don't know. Honestly, I'm not sure when I can wear this. I'm scared that it's going to be too cold for winter and too hot for summer. Maybe I'll have to make it again in a different yarn. My final work in progress is my Tombo Tee knit in pure silk from Knitting for Olive in the colour Dusty Artichoke. And this one, it's not in a great state to show you. I did post a picture to Instagram recently and I think the sleeves haven't grown that much, so maybe I'll just pop that up on the screen. Yeah, it's really funny. I posted that because I realized that I don't have any like real work in progress pictures on my Instagram, but I just kind of, part of me hates it because it's like pre-blocking, everything looks wonky. I don't know, it's not as aesthetic. I don't know how people make aesthetic work in progress content. It's just, it makes me, I mean, it's part of the process and that's totally fine to be honest about it. But on the other hand, I kind of look at my pictures and I'm like, oh, that one's just like clearly not as nice as the others. I don't know, maybe I'm just being too picky. So this is, yeah, I will not try this on because the sleeves are on one cable because I'm knitting them 2 at a time. And then the bottom is on 2 small needles because I needed my try-it-on tubing for other stuff. So yeah, that picture's all I've got. And honestly, there's nothing much to report on this except that I think since the last time I recorded, I did redo the I-cord. And I think it's looking much better. So in the end, I did go around and pick up all the way around and then attach, like do an I-cord bind off rather than doing the as you go. Although now that I know how to do it more correctly, maybe I'll try that. And I think it looks a lot better in almost all places. The only thing I'm now concerned about, and I haven't blocked it, is that it's too loose across the back of the neck and that it will roll, like flip outward, or kind of like just fold or bunch weirdly, like rather than just laying flat. But I'm hoping that in blocking that will be fixed. Yeah, it's really interesting. Down one diagonal, it looks really quite good. And then down the other one, I still have the teeniest bit of this thing that I was complaining about where you can kind of see the legs of the picked up stitches. Yeah. I also went a little bit more aggressive this time at picking up stitches slightly into the edge of the fabric, especially on this kind of diagonal, because I actually took a picture. There's like a little corner created by the edge of the, like, this shoulder strip and the main fabric. And I tried basically picking up a few stitches into it to make, like, smooth out that corner and make it a bit more of a straight line. But then I've kind of got see, you've got the little corner like on the inside. I guess it's just something to be aware of that I hadn't really thought about fully before, which is that when you pick up an I-cord, or like when you do an I-cord edging, I kind of, in my head, I'd assumed you enclose this edge somehow magically, but you don't. It just gets folded to the inside. And if it's little enough, like if you're quite close to the edge that you've picked up, then it doesn't matter. But yeah, if you are a bit more ambitious about how far in you go, you do just end up with that extra fabric. And it could poke out the edge of your I-cord if you're not careful. Or if your I-cord's loose and it flips, then you could kind of end up seeing that. Not something I'm actually concerned about when I'm wearing this. I think it's going to be fine, but just something I learned. Always learning new things. Anyway, I do think the side cord neckline is going to be quite nice, honestly, like quite the clean look I'm looking for. And then in terms of how much I have to go, so I've done this much from the underarm on each sleeve, but the good thing about 2 at a time sleeves is that that's on both sleeves. But I think I want it, yeah, I think I have quite a lot of sleeve left to go. And I haven't finished the body yet either, but I wanted to know how much yarn I have left after the sleeves because I might end up needing to buy another ball. I think I mentioned this, but I figure I'll just finish them. I mean, this is what I have left. This one's a lot smaller than this one, but yeah, we'll just have to see what happens. I'm not too worried about buying more. I think it shouldn't be too hard to find one with the same dye lot. This is a very popular color. So very briefly, I also have been doing a little bit of sewing. And like I mentioned last time, I was wearing a top that I wanted to dupe in sewing. And I kind of mostly did it. But I have just kind of stopped just before I've finished for some reason. So it's mostly finished, but all it needs is so I've got this scrap of unfinished fabric. Basically it's got ties, I'm doing it with ties at the back. The original had buttons, but I need to replace this with an actual tie. And then I need to hem the bottom edge all the way around because it's currently raw. But yeah, this one is meant to, I don't know if I can give you the vibe, but it's basically just like ties at the back, completely open back, but then quite a high front neck. Yeah, I didn't dupe it very successfully. I think it's ended up too wide at the front. And also I kind of added binding instead of whatever the original had done. And that is a little bit flared because I guess I didn't do bias binding. And maybe that if it's not on the bias, it has a tendency to flare. Not totally sure. Because this fabric is pretty thin, I decided to do a full facing for the front panel. But yeah, I'm not totally sold on it. I feel like it's kind of made it look less clean, and I feel like this in general with facing, like even on ready bought garments, is that sometimes it kind of gets caught on itself, and so it doesn't fall as nicely. It kind of makes it lumpy. Yeah, I don't know if I've described well what I mean, but I think it's quite cute and I think I might wear it sometime in the future, but yeah, I do need to finish it. Also, I kind of thought about the fastening at the back as an afterthought, and so what I should have done is instead of hemming this edge, I should have done binding all the way along and then just continued it out into the tie. But I've had to think about that before I added the straps. So instead I've done this bizarre and kind of ugly afterthought thing where I just have like started a little bit in and then gone out into a tie. Super ugly, super not professional, but it's on my back, so I don't have to see it. And I also, with this one, since I was duping a garment, I ended up actually creating my own pattern pieces for it that I could maybe adapt, given what I've learned for this one. So that's also quite fun. But I know, it's like 2 pattern pieces. It's like the front and then the back. But I don't know, my first attempt at having my own little paper pattern that I've vaguely created. Anyway, that's basically all of that. So I wanted to say that I know that summer is kind of on its way out and I'm not really going to have enough time to finish and wear any summer garments, I think. But I'm just going to use the summer weather as an excuse to keep using summer fibers. Well, okay, I don't know. I don't know what I'm going to do. So last video I had some linen yarn that I was showing and I wanted to make some a vest, and I wanted to make the Miledes top with it, and I swatched with it. Oh, where's my swatch? This is 2.75 millimeter needles, and it is like, it's a net. So I just bit the bullet, and I actually bought double what I had originally bought. So another 3 skeins of each color, this white and the dark green. So now my plan is to hold it double, which I think makes it basically like a sport weight yarn, which is what I've been trying to avoid, but maybe with linen, there's a limit to how thin you can have it and still kind of create a wearable garment. I guess if I was willing, I could knit this on like 2 millimeter needles, but I'm not willing, and I still don't know if it would actually have the result that I want. So yeah, that's still a vague plan, is to knit up my linen yarns. But I also, like I mentioned in the hat section, I am very excited to make some Colorwork mittens for my family. And I may as well get started on that sometime soonish. So that might be kind of some wild card projects that I do. And then finally, also on gift knits, my sister's moving to Scotland, and she's not moving with a whole lot of stuff. And then also in New Zealand, the winters are nowhere near as harsh, so she's going to need some winter gear. So I'm looking to knit her like a hood and a scarf set. I'm thinking probably the Cozy Cocoa hood by Kutova Kika is the hood pattern that I'm most keen to make. And then I was thinking maybe like a matching scarf just with a honeycomb stitch. But I know that honeycomb, I don't think it's reversible, but in looking it up, I came across a YouTube tutorial for reversible honeycomb stitch, which basically the background, like it's ribbed so that basically you end up with exactly the same look on both sides. And that seems nice in a scarf, because the other alternative is to knit a tube, but that's like double the knitting and double the yarn. Yeah, so I think I will do maybe like a matching-esque scarf, but maybe in a slightly different stitch. And my debate there is what yarn to use. I don't really know what's best for winter accessories. Like, I want something that's super soft. Like, I was debating like an alpaca blend, but I also guess that it gets a lot of friction and stuff with coats, maybe. So I don't necessarily want it to pill hugely, and I know I could protect it with like a mohair to make it a bit less pilly, but A, that makes it quite a lot more expensive, and B, I don't know whether mohair is actually the feeling that I want to go for, like if it'll feel as good as just like a plain yarn. So maybe then I have to accept that it'll pill and she'll just have to depill it. I don't know. I'm really not sure. And then in terms of structure, I don't know if I should avoid something that's too floppy, like get something with a bit more spring to it. So I guess I'm debating. Some options I'm considering is like the Knitting for Olive Heavy Merino, just held single, just by itself. Or alternatively, maybe like a much cheaper yarn, like a Drops Merino, held with a slightly nicer mohair. So like maybe a Knitting for Olive mohair. And in that case, hopefully most of what you feel is the mohair, and it also will stop pilling. Yeah, so if you have any recommendations for like winter accessory yarns that you've really liked. Oh, and the other thing is that she's looking for like I kind of want to make it for her in like a dark brown. So I was considering quite heavily using Drops Lima, but it doesn't go super dark in its colors. Anyway, so thinking about that, so if anyone has any ideas about that one, let me know, but that will probably make its way onto my needles pretty soon, because I wanted to have it by the time it actually gets cold, because that just seems, I don't know, in my mind I'm imagining that Scotland is kind of like freezing all the time. I don't know why. I mean, yeah, I also live somewhere that has cold weather, but I don't know. In my mind, she's going to need it more. Yeah, anyway, that's my plans kind of for the next little while. Probably none of them super immediate. I'm going to finish off the 2 works in progress that I showed before, I'll finish at least one of them before casting on anything new. Probably my next cast on will be one of those linen yarns, but yeah, that's basically it. I guess tiny little bit of personal life update, which I mean, not really life up. I always find it funny when people are like, it's my life update, and then they talk about like, I went on a bike ride. I guess it's just like things that are not knitting. In terms of not knitting in my life, I have recently, like last week, there was the swim across Lake Zurich, which is like 1,500 meters. And this was the second year that I did that. And it's just really fun feeling like you can go across a body of water. I don't know, there's something very empowering about it. As someone who's like, I'm not the strongest swimmer, and I didn't like grow up super confident in the water, so it is just really nice to have that confidence in myself that like, yeah, if I need to swim over a kilometer, I can do it. I don't know, I mean, it's less true if it's this is fresh water. I guess if it was like a stormy ocean, I'd probably have a lot less of a chance. But and it's not like, I'm not viewing it from a survival angle. It's just more like, I can do that, isn't that cool? And then on that front as well, my boyfriend and I took a hike up a mountain the mountain was only, this is what it's like to live in Switzerland. It's only 2,500 meters tall. But it's a good one because you start, basically we did a little bit of an up and over a ridge at one point as well. So we did some down and then up again. So we managed to do 2,000 meters of elevation in one day, which I think is pretty good going. Although I know that you get the weird like trail runners who do just batshit like amounts of elevation and distance in one day, and then you're just sitting there like, oh, okay, that makes my hike look like I was sitting on the couch. Anyway, I'm probably not going to be one of those people, so I'm happy enough with what we did. And it was stunning. It's in Appenzell, which just has the most amazing landscapes. Like, it really is quite a beautiful part of the world. So yeah, feeling very happy that I get to do these, like swim across a freshwater lake with like wonderful water quality, and then go on this hike through this beautiful like countryside. I don't know, it's pretty special. So yeah, really enjoying just like Switzerland in the summer. It's a good place to be. Cool, I think that's everything. If you have any thoughts, leave them below. If you are not subscribed and would like to be, please do that. And if you enjoyed this, please just give it a little thumbs up so that I can see. And yeah, in general, happy knitting. I hope that you're well. I hope that you're having fun.